It's big, it's bold, and it's probably the most expensive AIO we have ever tested. This is not the working man CPU cooler, it's pure, unadulterated opulence with its 6.67-inch panoramic display and ARGB bedazzled fans. But is the ASUS ROG Ryuo IV 360 ARGB all bluster and no breeze? Or is there something more to this pretty face? Spoiler alert, there is. And there's also a twist. And we're gonna discover all that right here, right now on Robeytech. We got our first look at the Ryuo IV at Computex last year, and wow, not only did it immediately go into our watch list for upcoming releases, it also made the list for our favorite AIOs coming out of Computex 2025. So now that we've had it in our studio for a little bit and we know where we're at on the price tag, it's time to take the Ryuo IV out for a spin. And by spin, I mean install it on a couple of different platforms, dig into what makes it unique, and look at some data and try to figure out who this AIO is for. But before we start, we want to say a huge thank you to ASUS for sending us over the ROG Ryuo IV 360 so that we can make this video for you today. So, right up top, let's look at the options before diving into what this thing is all about. At the time of this review, the Ryuo IV was only available in 360mm version and in either black or white. Now for these models, the price landed at around $440. I say around $440 because as Master Yoda once said,
"No, there is another."
Now, if you go searching for the Ryuo IV 360mm, you'll also find special edition versions, including the Hatsumi Miku edition, but good luck finding a price that isn't in arms, legs, or soles. I mean, I don't know, Brian, would you trade your soul for a Miku edition of this?
If I had one.
Yeah, you have to have the soul first, that's a good point. But then there is the Ryuo IV SLC 360mm. Now you might be asking, what's the difference? Don't worry, we had to squint to spot it too. Essentially, the Ryuo IV that we have here, the non-SLC version, looks like a standard AIO. The SLC version, however, shortens the hoses and moves the connection ports to the side of the radiator rather than at the end. In other words, it does what the Lian Li HydroShift does by minimizing the hoses, which not only makes it look great for tidying up cables, it also makes this AIO more viable in smaller builds too. As for pricing, the SLC version is slightly cheaper, but it's still around $430. So with that kind of price tag, it goes without saying that this AIO falls into the premium category. And I mean falls into like a giant lead balloon. Now, outside of AIOs like the $350 Trix Panorama 360 or something like an uber specialized cooler for your Threadripper CPU, there isn't a whole lot that touches this one in price. But what do you get for that money? Well, let's start with the socket support. The Ryuo IV has a pretty broad CPU support. If you're trying to cool an AMD CPU on AM4 or AM5, it's got you covered. Same goes for mainstream Intel CPUs as well. And to keep all of those CPUs cool represented in those families, the Ryuo IV comes with 320mm ROG Ryuo IV MF12C fans. And these fans have what ASUS calls their Aura Fan Edge. Ooh, that sounds fancy and expensive. As for specs, those are pretty interesting. They have speeds up to 2000 RPM, an airflow rating of 56.66 CFM, and a static pressure rating of 3.56 mmH2O. So overall solid, but not excessive. As for the pump, the Ryuo IV is housing the Asetek EMA, an 8th gen V2 pump. As for specs on this pump, those are not listed on the website. What is listed, however, are the details about the chunky boy sitting on top of the pump. This is a 6.67-inch curved AMOLED display that just looks stunning, and it utilizes the new ASUS InfoHub software. More on that during installation. While you can use it like a standard LCD with things like setting up hardware monitoring or looping your favorite GIFs, there are also built-in 3D effects that just look like they're popping out of the screen. It's actually pretty rad. Now, what's also rad is that the Ryuo IV has a 6-year warranty, which is on the higher side for an AIO and good for that kind of price. So all in all, the ASUS ROG Ryuo IV has some perks, but it also has a really high price tag for an AIO. All right, guys, now that we know the details, let's unbox and see what's inside of the box, which I love the unboxing experience of the ROG AIOs. They're a lot of fun. So, okay, first and foremost, you have a really nice box. It's got ROG on it. It won't have this. This is our box. It's broken. Our box is broken. It's garbage. Just kidding. Okay, let's see what's inside here. Okay. Ooh, snap. Wow, that's nice. Okay, so you get the little ROG credit card. I don't know if you guys know this, but each one of these has $1 million on it that you can spend at the ROG. It's actually not true. There's no money on that at all. But you can have it. You get your screen module installation guide. It shows you how to install it, and then boom, first and foremost, you actually get the screen here. And so, wow, that screen is, okay, so there is the screen. So this is that massive AMOLED screen. It doesn't usually look this scratched up, but obviously we've installed ours a number of times and stuff like that. So this unboxing is not a fresh unboxing, but we just want to show you everything that's inside of it. Kevin does a really good job of trying to make sure it looks as nice as possible, but all in all, really, really nice. Now, one thing I am going to let you guys know, it's not going to be like that in this unboxing, is that it does have pre-applied thermal paste. Obviously, given that we've installed this before, it won't be pre-applied on this one. Now we get a second box. It's actually got a little, icon on it. I don't know if you can show that, Brian, but it shows that this is all your mounting brackets and hardware. So we'll go ahead and open that up in just a second. And then these kind of pop out. So we got that. And then this is, oh, yep. Okay, so there's your pump head there. So this would typically have pre-applied thermal paste, and there'd also be a sticker on this. This is that screen. So where we mount the screen, and it's got like a little Velcro section here as well. So a little Velcro bit kind of to cover this. We'll see how that goes when we do the install and things like that. And then, yeah, that goes across. I think this is just to kind of protect it, but you can see there's a lot of movement that you can kind of have here. I don't know, maybe an inch or so. And then coming off of this, we have a, looks like a 4-pin PWM connection coming off this. So this is for your pump, obviously. The pump's actually pretty big when you kind of look at the overall profile. This is we talk about this in the later on in the video, but dude, you need to have a lot of room to install this. And then this kind of pops in. It says just like this. So this just kind of pops in, and then you have the whole thing kind of on the screen like this. Now off of this, you have a single, pretty long USB cable for an internal USB. And then we get to the rest of it. And the other thing that's really nice is that it looks like all of the fans are pre-installed. So, yep, and there's all of our fans. And I just knocked over, I was like, what did I knock over? My own power cable. So here's all the fans, they're all pre-installed. They have like ROG logos on them. And then obviously RGB, very nice quality fans. We went through the fan specs and stuff like that. We talked about what the CFM and stuff for that for, but that's all that belongs in there. So for installation hardware, we have CPU liquid cool technical updates. That's some great bathroom reading right there. You get some stickers. That's always fun. You get your liquid cooler. Does this actually show you how to install it? Yes. I actually appreciate when you get a piece of paper. So it actually gets an installation guide. And then we have inside, we have our AMD brackets. Okay, so I can already tell that this is like the standard ones where this will install the same on AMD and Intel, because this bracket basically makes it so you don't have to change anything on the actual pump head or anything like that. You also get some mounting screws as well. And then you have your sockets for Intel, which is you have your back plate, and then you also have your little things that look like little gels. That these are going to be your standoffs for your thumb nuts. That when you're going to basically install your thumb nuts, which the thumb nuts on this are actually pre-installed on the actual mount itself. So for both AMD and Intel, you'll use the same mount, which makes it a little bit more straightforward to do the installation here. And then how do I get this? And you got to break it. Oh, there it goes. And then that pops out. So it looks like you're going to have to kind of move this around to get the screws in. That's gonna be fun. That's gonna be fun. Okay, well, now that we've seen everything that's inside of it, let's get this installed on an AMD and an Intel motherboard. But that's what's inside the box. Let's go ahead and look at the installation. So we're gonna start with AMD first, and then we're gonna go to Intel. And really kind of the point of this section is just to show you how hard it is to install the AIO, and then you can see the process from beginning to end on both of them. So starting with AMD, the first thing we got to do is we basically need to remove the pre-installed little brackets here, as usual, because we know we're going to put in those Asetek universal ones. I am going to grab my little magnet tray here just to make sure I keep this connected. Or sorry, not connected, so I don't lose the screws. By the way, always make sure that you keep these, right? You never know when you might switch to another AIO. Some AIOs still use that, so it's always a good idea to throw these inside of the Mobo box. Okay, here we go. Okay, so now we're gonna go inside of our hardware box that we were looking at earlier during the unboxing. And we're gonna essentially grab our universal installation brackets here. So it's gonna show on here, Brian, it actually shows CPU is gonna go in the middle, right? So when we're all said and done, it'll actually point the direction of the CPU. So it makes it really easy, hopefully not to mess this up. So we're gonna pop this down like this, and then you can see CPU is pointed in the center, just like that. And we're gonna grab our little screws that were part of the bracket installation, so at least you won't lose these, which is nice. There we go. They both have it. They both say CPU in the center. Oh. Well, I mean, he should be able to get it at the top there, but there you can show the CPU on both. Yeah, why don't you show it? Why don't you get in there, Brian? Get in there. Zoom in. Show them all the details. Okay, so now that we've got that in, what we can do now is we're gonna add a little dab of thermal paste. The only reason I do this is do I really need to add it? No, but you would need to add this. I'm just gonna add a dab just so you guys don't go insane. So pop that in there like that. Okay. Now comes the interesting part, guys. Now we gotta mount this bad boy. Okay, so you wanna mount this. It looks like it really is going to mount with essentially the Velcro on the left. So I'm gonna make this as tight as possible, and we're gonna mount it just like that. And we're gonna put the screws. Now, if you are doing this, make sure that you peel off of the cold plate. I already showed you in mind that the cold plate was already done. We're gonna start with the right side. Okay, then we're gonna go to the left side. You have to kind of move the bracket. You gotta make sure it lines up. That's the key part. And then we'll do the star. I think that was the problem the first time, is that you actually have to make sure it's all lined up. It sits on it nicely, and then it just kind of screws down, which is nice. So you can just center this and you don't have to worry about kind of going around. So that way you don't have to move this a bunch. If you can get it to the point where you can actually get to all four, which is pretty cool. Okay, so then it's in and secure. Still have a lot of movement there. We have two connections off of the fans. We have the PWM fan connection, which is going to go to our CPU fan header, and then we have an RGB connection, which will go to whichever RGB header you have. So in this case, I'm going to plug it into, it's hard for you to see. Yeah, plug it into the CPU fan. And now we have the same, we have a PWM fan header here on the pump as well. So we'll take that. The PWM fan header will go to the pump header on the Mobo, or CPU optional is the other one that sometimes goes, so we got that plugged in there. And then from there, now what we can do is we can take our screen, that'll just kind of slide in like that. And then from there, you'll have on this, you have a USB cable, which usually you would run, behind your case, but in this case, because of just us doing it, this is gonna go down to one of your CPU headers on your motherboard, which are usually at the bottom, and plug into there. So honestly, what are we? 1, 2, 3, 4 cables, and your AIO is set up for AMD. So that's how to do it on AMD. Let's repeat the process. Oh, look at that. You get some nice shifting there. Let's repeat the process on Intel and see how that's different. Okay, so we've done AMD, now we're gonna do Intel. One thing about this AIO is that you do have to install ASUS InfoHub in order to use this AIO, but you also do need to have Armoury Crate installed. So one of the things we learned when we first set up this AIO is that you have to use Armoury Crate to do your firmware updates, and then you can control and do all of the regular work inside of InfoHub. So just something to be aware of. So CPU usage is going to be a little bit higher than Armoury Crate because now you're running 2 applications. Not entirely sure why they did that, but it is a thing. Also, it does come with pre-applied thermal paste, and it does have a plastic cover like this, so you will not have to worry about peeling because you would not be able to install it with this plastic thing on. So just something to be aware of right there as we go through this. Okay, so let's talk about Intel. Big difference is that you got to start with your bracket. It has a bunch of settings on it. We have it currently set up, as you can see, actually on here, Brian. You can see that it actually has a couple settings, and they're actually for LGA for the different chipsets, right? So we have it set it right now currently for LGA 1851. Which on here says 78 by 78, and then it has a 75 by 75. So you just need to change it accordingly to set that up for your Intel if you're using something older or newer, and then you're just gonna pop it in. You don't really need to, it only goes in one way. So once you kind of get it in, then it sets like that. Pop it down, and then what we're gonna do is gonna pop these little plastic pieces on, like so. Okay. And then it's going to be very, very similar to AMD at this point in time. So we're going to grab some thermal paste. This, again, you would have pre-applied thermal paste, but we're just going to put it on here just to, so we do it right, so nobody yells at me. You know, just because I love to waste thermal paste. You know, I have giant tubes of it. I have infinite money for thermal paste. Okay, so there we go. Okay, take this out. It's going to be the same thing as AMD. Just going to kind of line them up and have it sit on top of the brackets like this. So it'll pre-sit on them like that. And then we'll grab our screwdriver. So we'll start this one. There's some adjustments you can make with the screws themselves to get it in there, but once you kind of have it all set in there, they'll kind of sit on the posts themselves. And then we'll just start the star pattern for each one. There we go, just like so. And so again, just as a note, the screws have adjustments. You can move those, obviously, and we kind of moved them out so that way they're adjusted nicely over the thumb nuts. We adjust the thumb nuts to be able to sit over the screw holes. And then we're just gonna finish the installation here. So we're just gonna go screw to screw. That sounds weird. Just keep going around into star pattern, just like that. And it's gonna, they will eventually just stop. And then now, what we're gonna do is we're gonna install our screen. Perfect. And then now what we're gonna do is we're gonna do the same thing. Off of our fans, we're gonna take our CPU fan, that's gonna go right here on this board, and then we're gonna take our RGB, which I think it's down here at the bottom. So we'd have to route this all the way down to be able to do that, but you would route it otherwise. Okay, there we go. And then we're gonna take our AIO one, there's a pump head one, that's gonna go right there. So there's our pump head, and then this is gonna go on our USB down here at the bottom. Bada boom, bada bing. We basically have it installed. Now, one thing I did notice I had a little bit of problems. You just wanna make sure that you do them evenly because I ended up having a little problem with this top right-hand screw. But for the most part, just make sure that they're all on. That was the one thing I probably noticed the most, is just make sure they're all on the posts and started before you tighten it all the way down. But there you go, now you've got your installation for Intel, and there it is. So that's how to install them. Let's continue the review. Now that we know a bit more about the Ryuo IV 360 and have a couple installations under our belt, can it keep our test bench CPUs cool enough? Now, as a reminder, all of our AIO tests are performed in nearly identical Intel and AMD CPUs. We'll post notes on the screen for all the details. All of this is done under the same conditions to keep the data as clean as possible. We're all about science. We also reset our benches recently, so we made some updates and flattened our list comparisons to some of the last year's top picks, which you can see in this video. Now, we're gonna go through this at a pretty fast pace, so feel free to at any point pause the video if you want. Now, starting with our Intel bench under full CPU load, the Ryuo IV held our 14700K at an average right in between 80 and 81 degrees Celsius. I kid you not, it landed right in the middle. This average sandwich hit between the Cooler Master Elite Liquid 360 and the MSI Core Liquid A15, so not a bad start. Now, moving on to Cinebench, the Ryuo IV played it a bit more modest here with a score of 7,771. The Ryuo IV landed between the Elite Liquid and the Hydra Shift 2. As for power draw under load, the Ryuo IV allowed our CPU to average just under 249 watts, which when you look at the spectrum of power draw averages, it lands close to the middle between 245 and 252. So not stand out, but also not terrible. Now, talking about standing out, in gaming, we clocked the Ryuo IV at an average of just above 54 degrees Celsius, and with a power draw average just shy of 121 watts. This puts the Ryuo in the top 3 for temps. So overall, on Intel, the Ryuo IV seems to be backing up its looks with some performance chops. But what about over on AMD? Under full CPU load, the Ryuo IV kept our 7700X at an average right smack in between 82 and 83 degrees Celsius. The average made the Ryuo the coolest thermal performer under load. But did that translate to Cinebench? Not so much. While the Ryuo IV didn't do terribly here, it was a few steps above the bottom of our current charts with a score of 4,575. As for power draw, the Ryuo IV was pretty modest here with an average just above 139 watts. And finally, in gaming, the Ryuo IV held its second place position in the AMD side with an average hair just above 57 degrees Celsius with a power draw average of just over 90 watts. So when we put all of that together and we look at this picture across both platforms, the Ryuo IV paints a picture of an AIO that can not only do a really solid job cooling right out of the box, but it also looks like it has plenty of headroom if you're looking to do some serious overclocking. But as always, proceed at your own risk when you're doing any overclocking. And remember, boys and girls, it can void your warranty. Moving on to noise levels, with fans running at 100% under full CPU load, we recorded the Ryuo IV at 65.4 decibels, and with fans running while gaming, we basically recorded it at 52.7. So it's not going to be the most stealthy AIO, but it's also not the loudest we've ever heard. As always though, if you liked everything else about an AIO except for the noise, there's always the opportunity to swap out the fans, which can absolutely help. Just know that the performance will also change if you do, so make sure that you compare the numbers to make sure you're not losing out on cooling performance. Okay, one more data point before we look at the whole picture. Now let's look at the relative value. To get the numbers to compare, we're dividing the MSRP by the difference between the CPU thermal max, which is 100 degrees Celsius, and the average CPU temperature under load. This gives us a dollars per degree of cooling value for comparison. In this case, lower is better. These numbers are based off of the data we collect from our Intel bench and the MSRP of the AIO at launch. Understand that the values would change as the prices shift, so do the math to see where they land today. And just where do they land today? With a relative value score of 23.1, the Ryuo IV is not winning any awards for being a budget-conscious AIO. But let's be really honest with ourselves. I don't believe anyone for a second saw this AIO and immediately thought, this thing is gonna save me so much money. That's not to say it's a bad cooler, you're just paying for a lot more than just its cooling potential. And this is where we have to remember that everyone values different things, and that this equation only tells one part of the story. With that in mind, there is one final question. Is the Ryuo IV worth considering for your next AIO? This AIO is like black truffle-covered gold flake dusted caviar on top of a Wagyu filet. It's luxury on top of luxury. It's like driving a 911 but saying, look, I need a daily driver, so then I buy another 911 and then say, no, I need an actual daily for my daily, and then getting, like a Mercedes G-Wagon. But that said, it's not just a luxury AIO, this thing can actually cool really well. Now when we look at the landscape of AIOs that we tested so far this year, it holds its own from a thermal standpoint against some really strong performers on both AMD and Intel. So it's not just about the looks, though those don't hurt either. From a visual standpoint, the screen is vibrant and it really does make for a truly show-stopping AIO, like it's daring you to try to ignore it. But before you decide to drop over $400, you should be prepared for a few things. Thing number one, you're gonna need a big case, at least with a lot of clearance for coolers. With how big and massive this display is, you're gonna need to make sure that your case can support the full 137mm height of this thing. While that's still smaller than most air coolers, just know that it's going to demand a lot of space inside of your build. Thing number two, while it's not loud, we did hear some rumbling and a little bit of whining from the screen. Now, it could be just our unit, and it's not in a haptic feedback sort of way, but in a, oh, we're driving down a bumpy road sort of way. It actually becomes a lot more noticeable while gaming, but it's entirely possible that that's just a design flaw within our model. And when we take all of that into consideration, the one question we haven't really answered is, who is this actually for? Now, the obvious answer is it's for the PC builder who's trying to make a statement with their build, as it's both pricey and of course flashy. It also has a side that feels odd calling it practical when everything about this AIO is not. But it's hard to argue with the data if you're looking for an AIO with plenty of headroom for overclocking and that looks absolutely amazing. From what we saw on both platforms during thermal testing, I think we only really saw a fraction of what the Ryuo IV is capable of from a cooling standpoint with how much headroom there actually was. At the end of the day, the ASUS ROG Ryuo IV is an enthusiast AIO in every sense of the word. It's pretty, it's expensive, it does some pretty good work, and it has the potential to open up a world of potential on your CPU if you're overclocking and that's your jam. Just be prepared that it's going to cost you a lot for all of those things, which some of you are down for. Like that guy who has 3 911s and a G-Wagon, and a Bugatti, and a Koenigsegg, and a helicopter, and a yacht. Yeah, I'm looking at you, Jeff Bezos. Go get this AIO. And those were our thoughts on the ASUS ROG Ryuo IV 360 ARGB, but we want to know what you think. What do you think about ROG's take on the panoramic AIO? And what would you put on a display like this? And if you're going to pick one up, are you team hoses to the front or team hiding hoses is cool? And let us know all that down in the comments below. And hey, while you're down there, and if you like this video or you learned something from it, we'd love it if you'd hit those like, subscribe, and notification bell buttons. We have a lot more content like this coming here at Robeytech, Robeytech Live, and all over your favorite social media platforms. And hey, if you have questions or you want to talk about this video, hop onto our Discord server over at discord.gg/Robeytech. Thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one. And if you're still watching, what are you doing with your life? Go outside. It's nice.